Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. Pressure is building on the Chancellor after the long-term cost of government borrowing reached its highest level since 1998. North Korea's leader has arrived in Beijing for talks with China and Russia, but President Trump has dismissed concerns that an axis is being formed to challenge the US-led world order. And councillors in Epping say they've been refused permission to challenge a court decision which allows asylum seekers to continue to be housed at the Bell Hotel. Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines. With us, you can see this evening, the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Great to see both of you, and welcome. So as ever, let's check out the front pages, shall we? And starting with the Financial Times, the 27-year high in borrowing costs, the headache that causes the Chancellor Rachel Reeves ahead of the autumn budget makes the front page of the FT. The country's financial problems also featuring on the front page of the Times as well. Starmer plans ID cards for all to help stop UK boat migrants is the front page splash for the Eye. The Daily Mail asks, when did Britain become North Korea? And claims it's another day in Starmer's socialist utopia as reports surface about the Prime Minister's ID card plan. The Metro leads with Father Ted creator Graham Linehan's claim that he was arrested at Heathrow Airport by 5 armed police officers over social media posts about transgender people. Britain's fecht, if I can say that. The Sun uses a turn of phrase from the popular TV show as it reports on Mr Linehan's arrest. That story also appears on the front page of The Telegraph, implying Sir Keir Starmer is critical about that. The Guardian has an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister of Spain. Their headline quotes him saying Europe's response to Gaza has been a failure. The Express claims 100,000 lives are at risk in a cancer care lottery. Pay up to go free. The Mirror has a story on British teenager Bella Cully held on drugs charges in Georgia. And the Daily Star focuses on the newly elected Green Party leader and his hypnotic past. So we're joined by Zoe and Alex. Plenty to talk about and quite a range, but many of them going on the Linehan story, which makes the front page of The Sun.
I mean, the Sun has already decided that this is a sign not only that Linehan has been treated extremely unfairly, but also that it's a sign that the country itself has gone to the dogs. I don't trust my Irish accent enough not to mispronounce it, but, you know, they're really nailing their colours to the mast, and you really notice that. This isn't just the Sun or even the Mail getting hot under the collar. The very kind of neutral news coverage on the BBC earlier was that making what I think is a very premature judgment, given that the tweets that he's been arrested for haven't been publicised. That he's somehow been treated incredibly unfairly by a totalitarian state for perfectly regular and acceptable speech, with which you can agree or disagree, but you can't find illegal. Now, Linehan himself, if you read his Substack and read some of the surrounding coverage, is very upset at the manner of the arrest with 5 armed policemen. But actually, this is because the police, he was arrested at an airport, and the police at airports do tend to be armed. It wasn't that they thought he was so dangerous that they needed to take a gun with them.
But the police are armed at an airport, but they didn't need to pull a gun effectively. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think they pulled a gun on him. I mean, in fact, I know they didn't pull a gun on him. Yeah, of course not. I mean, it was he's basically using it to turn himself into this kind of Joan of Arc character. And I think, not necessarily The Sun, because they have an agenda, and so does the Mail, and so to a degree does the Times. But certainly people who think of themselves as impartial are jumping the gun on this, because you know, Linehan has said things in the past which are illegal. You know, he's made accusations that are illegal and are libelous. And the idea that he couldn't possibly have said something illegal because this is a hot-button issue, so anything is fair game, is not legally sustainable.
Yes, well, we're not here to challenge those previous tweets or, writings, are we?
No, but,
Daily Telegraph says, or implies that Starmer has attacked the Met over this trans tweet arrest, as they put it. So Keir Starmer has told police to concentrate on tackling serious crime after what happened. I mean, the context of this, of course, is the backdrop of Elon Musk criticising, JD Vance criticising the lack of free speech in this country. So that's the sort of the mood music to which we enter this fray.
Yes, and the Prime Minister will have to join the list of people that Zoe thinks has jumped the gun in thinking that sending officers to arrest someone off a plane for tweets is a bit disproportionate. Baroness Hayter, the Labour peer who's long-time consumer rights advocate, said today that she'd spent a long time trying to get police to respond to drunken or offensive or aggressive passengers on flights around the UK and could never get the police to take that issue seriously. But don't worry, if you've tweeted something that's bad, they'll be straight on it.
Well, no, but Alex, I mean, like, tweeting something bad it can be aggressive and unpleasant.
You think it's... no one was suggesting that he was doing something, unless you know something I don't, on the plane. Baroness Hayter's point is...
I didn't interrupt you,
right? I didn't interrupt you, right? He wasn't causing difficulty on the plane that meant you needed to go mob-handed and have 5 people take someone off a plane, take his devices off him and so forth. But so the point that was being made by a peer on your side of the fence was we've got our priorities wrong. She might not say Britain's fecked, but she's making the point that we've got our priorities in the wrong order. You seem to disagree. Is that because you dislike the man, or is it...
If we just talk it, given this is a kind of active investigation, we talk a bit more generally about the prospect of free speech and how you might arrest people.
I'll make a more general point then, which is the American angle is actually quite an acute one, given that he was in the United States when he did the last set of tweets. So the Americans will probably feel like they've got some skin in this game. And they've got a point, right? Because our tradition of free speech and the common law and freedom under the law, stemming from Magna Carta, makes us very close cousins. And with behaviour like this, it is us diverting from that, not them.
Well, I mean, first of all, I can actually avoid Linehan by saying that Elon Musk's tweets, I don't know if any of you remember them, about the potholing, about the cavers who saved those kids in Thailand, where he called them paedophiles, and I think...
No, I don't have to agree with Musk to think the Vice President of the United States talking about this as an issue.
But you haven't let me finish my sentence, so you don't know what I'm going to say. The content of that was libelous and defamatory to those people who were heroes, and it was completely legitimate of them to say, this has actually breached my rights and threatened legal action. Now, Linehan has made accusations of paedophilia to people before and has no restraint in this matter. So the idea that under the, Magna Carta, everybody should be allowed to accuse other people of being a groomer is completely ridiculous.
We were asked a question about America's perspective on free speech in the United Kingdom, which has been set out by their Vice President in front of our Prime Minister, and you take refuge in the fact that you don't like Elon Musk's tweets to avoid the issue.
Well, we weren't asked that question. You raised that question. I don't think it's at all relevant what JD Vance thinks. I would absolutely deplore the Met Police if they checked with the Americans before they arrested somebody. B, I was just drawing a similarity between Elon Musk because you had no problem at all finding that deplorable, and yet you don't mind when Linehan does it. And C, the entire kind of structure around that people don't get arrested when they're drunk on a flight. I've done a feature about this in the past 6 months. People are constantly getting arrested off flights.
Okay.
That's the police's main job at airports.
Let's go to Rachel Reeves, shall we? Because
happier topic.
Well, I think you might disagree about some of this as well. Anyway, right. I feel like just pressing play with you, Alex, on this one, which is Rachel Reeves's leeway shrinks as the pound falls, borrowing costs at a 27-year high, etc., etc. How much of a pickle do you think we're in?
It's an extremely generous headline to say that her leeway has shrunk. As anyone who watched Ed Conway's piece on your channel just before we came on air would know, we are now an outlier in comparison with our peer sets in the G7, in our debt servicing, in our inflation, and now in what we're paying on our 30-year gilts. And if people think that gilts are some sort of mystery or just within the city, gilt yields are what we pay international investors to loan the UK money. So we're paying more to get into debt. And we're already paying 125 billion a year on our debt. It looks like, and I know we're at our 27-year high, it looks like it's going to get worse. This isn't a blip. This isn't a 1 or 2 week flip like we saw with Truss. This is sustained. Truss was bad, right? I concede that as a Tory. This now looks like our future. And if we go through 6%, as all of the international markets are suggesting, we'll be an international pariah. We are on a race to the IMF.
So the question then is what the Chancellor does about it. We'll look at the Times as we talk, because they had a similar headline: Reeves sees borrowing costs reach a 27-year high, warnings that budget tax rises will hit growth. So the concern is if you can't borrow because it's too expensive, you have to cut spending or you have to raise taxes. So what does she now focus in on? Because she's going to have to start making some really difficult decisions.
Well, certainly all the pressure is on her to go back to the welfare bill and...
Well, this is in the Daily Telegraph, actually. The Prime Minister will drive through money-saving welfare reforms following his number 10 reset, the Telegraph understands, suggesting one factor in Sir Keir's number 10 shake-up was a failure to appreciate the scale of resistance to the original welfare package until just 2 days before the vote, which led to that unravelling and U-turns.
But that doesn't help, does it? To kind of say, to situate this with his political miscalculations and say, well, he didn't realise what kind of resistance
Well, it just means he wants to go back for another bite.
Yeah. But I mean, there's no suggestion that he's going to meet less resistance. The fact is,
probably more.
There's no, exactly. And everybody can agree that the bond markets are giving everybody the heebie-jeebies, but that doesn't mean that everybody agrees on how the pain should be distributed, and people aren't going to agree.
Well.
The ridiculous thing about these conversations is that, we talk about whether we become an international pariah, we talk about whether we kind of need to go back to the drawing board and make the welfare cuts. But truthfully, every country that makes political promises and doesn't keep them, that promises improvement that never arrive, then just stores up political upheaval and uncertainty, which makes you a pariah in the long run anyway.
That is a fair point about the political dilemma, but the financial one is stark, because today we saw the yield on gilts go up. And when that happens, when you're paying international investors more, normally your currency strengthens because you're paying people more for your debt. We're paying more for our gilts and our currency went down. This is a sign, this is the beyond amber warning on the cockpit lights.
So my question was, what actually will she have to do?
She has to cut spending. You can't go into
you would say that because you're a Tory.
You would say that, wouldn't you?
You can't go into more debt. You have to get it done.
You can raise more income for the Exchequer via taxation.
Do you realise how ruinous it would be borrowing at these rates? You are impoverishing people not just yet to be born, but in 5 years' time.
I'm not talking about borrowing. You've got borrowing, you've got spending cuts, or you've got taxation increases, right?
Course,
if you put borrowing in the back picture, because it's too expensive, you've got two choices now. Which one are you going to go for?
Yeah, she has to cut spending. And you know how...
Why?
Because our economic credibility will be shot if we raise taxes any further.
But listen,
we're already squeezed to pips.
No, that's actually not right, is it? I mean,
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. The whole point, the whole reason the left is so disillusioned with Starmer and Reeves is that they came in. Certainly, he pitched for the leadership on a left-wing ticket, and then explicitly ruled out any kind of wealth tax. Explicitly ruled out any kind of
people that got
realignment.
you elected.
Well, no, I don't think that's right, Alex. I don't think you can say very simply the reason you got in is because you promised not to tax rich people anymore. I don't think...
No, they promised not to put up taxes on working people, not rich people, working people.
Yeah, but that didn't come right, did it? They explicitly rode back from any suggestion of wealth taxes, and that will be the pressure from everybody who's opposing welfare cuts.
Well, they can get it through with Tory votes if they're willing to do it.
Yeah. OK, well, that's the question, isn't it? This is a big subject. We will return to it, no doubt. Both of you stay there. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, discussing the front of the eye, claiming the Prime Minister is planning to introduce ID cards for UK citizens to help stop the boats, as it were. Back in a moment.
Show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
backed white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation. No, we lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis. Up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, as you can see, the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Welcome back to both of you. So we go to the new leader for the Green Party, who you have interviewed. And you might then therefore explain the Daily Star front page. I know our correspondent asked about this today. Alex is just... Do you want to leave, Alex? What?
No. No, I can keep it together.
Okay. It was such a terrible story that a Sun journalist had gone to him while he was a hypnotist, which was about 13 years ago, and said, "Can you make my boobs bigger?" And he'd said yes. And I remember reading it and thinking, well, that's over for him. He sounds like a creep. He sounds like a misogynist. He sounds like a pervert. Anyway, then when I met him, so this is the whole story, soup to nuts. He was a hypnotist. He wasn't in politics at all. This journalist, stop laughing. This journalist who didn't announce she was a journalist, by the way, was trying to get the story that hypnotists are making these bizarre claims, and she basically led him up the garden path saying, "Can you make my boobs bigger?" And he...
But what was his... What did he said he apologised?
No, his whole thing was... obviously, we can improve your self-esteem with these exercises. He was thinking, well, this is just a girl with low self-esteem. I can hypnotise her into thinking her boobs are bigger. But, you know, he's just a nice guy. He's not even... the creep thing is completely off the table. He's gay anyway. So he definitely wasn't trying to kind of make any salacious
So this
remark.
is a story about how things linger in your...
I'll tell you what is
history,
the story of. It's the story of the luckiest day the Sun ever had, that they just happened to be trying to get a hypnotist for a fun so, you know, August story.
It turns out to
and
now
it turns
to be a
out to
political
now
party
be
leader.
the scourge of the right wing. I mean, it's like, it's their luckiest day ever.
There's something serious to say about this against all odds, which is that the Green Party faced a choice today and in the run-up to this, which was about whether they went left or right. They won a couple of seats at the last election in conservative-leaning patches.
Yes.
Nevertheless, they've decided, I mean, really heavily, like he won 80-20 to go down the further left route.
Very quickly, because I want to get to our last
He's, of course,
story.
the candidate who said he wouldn't rule out a coalition with Keir Starmer and Sultana. So,
You mean Corbyn?
with Corbyn and Sultan. Excuse me. Thank you very
That
much.
would be quite interesting.
Get them mistaken all the time.
Wow.
He wouldn't rule out a coalition with Jeremy Corbyn. And so that's where he was. And the Greens, if they wanted to make further inroads into the kind of leafy suburbia and Tory-type seats that they were doing well in, have probably taken a step back.
OK, and last story then. I know you want to come back in, but it's too late. Starmer plans ID cards for all. I know the French say that we've got this grey economy, people can disappear in it. Anyway, it's all part of the Stop the Migrant crossings in the Channel.
I mean, the truth of it is, if Starmer really wanted to know where all the small boat arrivals were in the country, then he could do a lot worse than simply improving the process of the processing their applications and telling them whether they're granted asylum or not. This is just a complete
yes, no for
late
you.
Blairite.
No,
ridiculous.
it is a symptom of the trouble this government's got itself into, that in order to deal with illegal migrants, they think we all have to have ID cards.
OK, or asylum seekers as well. Zoe, Alex, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Back for more in the 11.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
It is 11 o'clock. This is Sky News' extended press preview. Our top story: pressure on the Chancellor as the cost of government borrowing soars, the pound slumps and shares fall. As North Korea's dictator arrives in Beijing for talks with China and Russia, President Trump dismisses concerns about a rival axis forming.
China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know, but China needs us much more than we need them.
Councillors in Epping are refused permission to appeal over asylum seekers being housed at the Bell Hotel.
You gotta use rape on our kids.
Save our kids! Police investigate after a Sky News interview about asylum seekers was interrupted by women shouting about rape. And astronomers say stargazers could get another chance tonight to catch a glimpse of the Northern Lights. Well, over the next hour, we will be discussing today's news with art reviewers Zoe Williams and Alex Dean. And later, we'll have a full run-through for you of tomorrow's front pages. Hello there, good evening. Pressure is building on the Chancellor after a slew of financial data laid bare concerns about the state of the economy. The cost of long-term government borrowing hit a near 30-year high today. The pound dropped by more than 1% against the US dollar, and the FTSE 100 suffered its worst fall in 5 months. Well, Downing Street insists that Rachel Reeves will stick to her fiscal rules, but as concerns grow about the state of the UK's finances, she now faces the prospect of hiking taxes in the budget to balance the books. Well, over the next hour, we will bring you tonight's headlines, tomorrow's front pages, and the views of our paper reviewers, The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. First of all, our economics editor Ed Conway has this analysis of the country's financial position.
Looking at markets at the moment, some extraordinary things really happening, starting with gilt yields. What are gilt yields? They're basically the interest rate that the government has to pay on its debt. And when I say the government, basically means all of us. This is showing you that interest rate on 30-year debt, so kind of the closest thing that there is to a mortgage. And that interest rate for the UK has gone up, and it's now at the highest level that it's been going all the way back to 1998. But it's worth just asking the question, is the UK an outlier? Are we the only one facing gilt yields as high as this? Well, in one sense, certainly yes, because if you compare other countries around the world, and in particular G7 nations, so other industrialised nations, this is showing the maximum, the minimum. The UK used to be more or less middle of the pack up until here, the mini budget, back in 2022. And look at the red line, OK, so that's spiked. But particularly look at it in relation to the rest of the other G7 nations. We just remained higher. And since the election, actually the UK's cost of borrowing has been higher than most other G7 nations. So definitely an outlier in that respect. And there's other bad news as well. You know, if you're the Chancellor, you don't like to see that last chart. You don't like to see this either, because this is the pound versus the US dollar. And just look at what has just happened to the pound. It's sunk. It's one of the biggest one-day falls that we've had in a long time for the pound. So those two things together, it's the kind of thing that people at the Treasury start to get worried about, raising the question, what's going on here? Well, one thing is what's going on with the public finances. I'll come to that in a second. But gilt yields are also affected, and to some extent the pound, by what's going on with inflation. And here, the UK is also a bit of an outlier. This is showing you the inflation rate for the UK, so CPI, the rate at which prices are changing each year. And you can see it's risen up relatively high in the last few months. And if you compare it not just to the Bank of England's 2% target, but to other countries, again, same thing that we did earlier, other countries in the G7, have a look. The UK is comfortably now got the highest inflation in the G7. So it's not just about the public finances, it's also about inflation. But when it comes to the public finances, obviously the Chancellor looking at this ahead of the budget that's coming up later on this autumn, there's an enormous question mark, OK? So right now, this is a projection for long-term revenues, so tax revenues for the government over the next few decades. OK, they're relatively flat there. Look at what happens to spending, just based on higher spending on health, higher spending on social security, higher spending on pensions. That's where it is at the moment. And if that red line is higher than the blue line, that means you're basically having to borrow more. Look at what happens in the coming years. So that is projected to go to over 200% of GDP, basically the highest it's been in peacetime that we have ever seen before. And this is part of the reason, that gap between the two of them is part of the reason why Rachel Reeves is going to be focusing on that when it comes to the budget coming up shortly.
Ed Conway with his assessment there. So what about the newspapers? Let's take a look. Here's the front of the Financial Times. Leading on it says the Chancellor's leeway is shrinking as the pound falls and borrowing costs hit a 27-year high. The Times has a similar headline with warnings that budget tax rises will negatively affect growth. The Guardian says pressure is piling on Rachel Reeves after a fresh sell-off in government bond markets as the pound weakens. So let's talk more, both with big thoughts about this, no doubt. Guardian columnist Zoe Williams, PR consultant Alex Dean are here. So it's not a pretty picture for Rachel Reeves. If you borrow, it's very expensive. So what do? You have two options left, which is to cut spending or increase your revenue, presumably via taxation. So what does she do?
She has promised not to increase taxes on working people, and the Labour Party went to the public with that as a manifesto commitment at the last election, which of course they won with a handsome majority. I think they should cut spending. Zoe thinks they should raise taxes. If they are going to raise taxes, having pledged so fundamentally so to do, I think if you are going to change your economic policies so fundamentally, you have to change your Chancellor. You cannot stick with the Chancellor who's promised to our face that she won't raise tax. So they'll either, I think, have to cut spending, which is hard to do, but Reeves could do, or raise taxes, changing their position away from that promise. But the person who made that promise can't stick in the role.
OK, a couple of things. First, they've already changed the policy that they promised in the manifesto. You remember the whole, oh, there's this 20 billion black hole that we weren't expecting. Oh, my gosh, that obviates everything we said.
But that was slightly ridiculous.
I mean,
this
look,
is not 20 billion. This is crazy.
You might think it's ridiculous, you might not think it's ridiculous, but the fact is they've rode back from almost everything they said in that manifesto, except for the fact that they did make it quite clear they weren't going to introduce any wealth taxes. And actually, when Reeves was asked about wealth taxes in the run-up to the election, she'd honestly jumped away as if she'd been burnt with a stove. It was ridiculous how frightened she was of coming off like somebody who might in any way, shape or form want to tax rich people.
So is she still scared of that prospect?
She's terrified of that. And the idea that she's keeping to some promise of not taxing working people more. She's already taxing working people more, and you know that. You said that like 20 minutes ago.
She's put
there's none of this. All of this compunction.
I agree with you that raising national insurance contributions by employers is a tax on jobs, which is effectively a tax on working people. But they haven't done it directly on income tax and so forth in the way that we all fear.
And nor do I think that that kind of shaving off ever kind of more minuscule amounts of kind of income is
so do you mean like going after landlords, for example?
You know, they've got to go after landlords, they've got to go after wealth.
In order to get any money?
Wealth rather than income. That is the only way to equitably distribute what I agree is probably going to be an amount of pain.
So you think there will be a form of wealth tax?
Well, no, I don't think there will until they change Chancellor, so we probably do agree on that.
We might agree.
But, you know, there is also the fact that if you are going to go after public spending, I'm absolutely sick to death of always talking about public spending as a benefits claimants thing. Go after the triple lock if you want to go after anything.
Well, I agree with that.
Ridiculous.
But I agree with that, but I also agreed with his welfare reforms. And even despite their enormous... I know you didn't, but the point is it was government policy, and even despite an enormous majority, they couldn't get it through the House.
I know, but the fact is the manifesto promises made to people on benefits are always considered not really relevant. They're not considered proper voters because they're on benefits. They're not... Promises made to them aren't real promises. They are real promises. And those people were promised that things were going to get better, not worse.
Look, I worry that people might watch even that very stark and clear report from Ed Conway and not realise how much trouble we are in. The outlier position we occupy as opposed to the G7 on what we're paying for debt is already bad. If you look at the projection upwards on the cost of our debt, up to 200% of GDP, that is a sprint to go to the IMF for a loan. That is national bankruptcy beckoning. And And so we've seen today in the newspapers, Saxo Markets, Deutsche Bank, Rabobank, Franklin Templeton. These are Franklin Templeton. These are organisations that have billions of pounds invested here and loan money to the UK. Saxo Markets talked openly today about the moron premium we are paying on our debt. I mean, these institutions are not holding back.
So in terms of whether Sir Keir Starmer, who seems to have taken some of the reins of what a Treasury would do by stealing Darren Jones, formerly Chief Secretary to Treasury, now Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, what he seemed, whether he'd have another nibble at welfare. So the Telegraph, it's a bit small, we'll see if we can get it up, says the Prime Minister will drive through money-saving welfare reforms following his number 10 reset.
Well,
this is the Telegraph understanding.
The thing is, what Keir Starmer's doing, and the reason he's not finding friends on the left or the right or the middle or anywhere, is that he's trying to, what he's trying to do is enact a kind of market-soothing policy, which will inevitably tell on the quality of public services and public spending, while at the same time he doesn't quite have the courage or the sway in his own party to do that decisively, so he can't do an austerity package. He doesn't really have the
but the way that he's talking, Alex, it's really serious. You're still talking about shaving tiny, minuscule bits on this side. And
I'm not saying
the sums will not add up if you keep doing mini shaves that don't quite produce any income.
It's an incredibly serious situation, but trying to address it by loading it all on people who are already the poorest people in society, it doesn't give us a stable economy.
But the point about this, though, is that every story that's been floated has been about a form of wealth taxation, hasn't it? And now it's like, there is going to be a balance of the Prime Minister determined to overhaul the disability payment system and get people on long-term sickness benefits back to work. And it's the back-to-work message that they want.
Like, number one, there is absolutely no way there is enough fat on the disability allowance system.
So where's I'm asking, where's the fat?
The fat is in wealth taxes. There's nobody's saying do wealth taxes. Nobody is.
So what does wealth taxes do to growth? And
well, who knows? Because nobody's tried them for years.
The Corbyn Sultana and Green Party now will say wealth taxes, but between them will have 10 MPs.
But to be honest, Farage is probably going to say it because he'll literally say anything.
That's 15 MPs between them, and we've got 4 years until the next election. So even if you're right, you're not going to deliver the change that you want to have.
I know, but listen, Alex, you're not... your way, where you just listen to the markets and punish anybody who says boo to the markets forever, that's not working either, is it?
It's not just my way. We are 18 months ago we were paying 110 billion to service our debts. We're now paying 125 billion pounds to service the debt.
But all you're making is the case for a much more radical solution.
No one will invest here ever in our lives again. Who will ever loan us money? You're going to tax everything off them and tax their employees to death. Yours is a recipe for financial disaster.
It really depends which employees you're talking about. If you're talking about their cleaners, I'm saying, no, don't tax them to death. You're already taxing them to death. I'm talking about taxing wealth. This is ridiculous. We cannot have wealth constantly sucked
why not just put up income tax? I mean, why not just fundamentally put up income tax?
For this reason, that there just isn't the fat in the system. People aren't on enough. They are not earning enough. All the distribution of capital, or the distribution of profit between capital and labour has been creeping towards capital and away from labour for the past 45 years. And it's getting to the point of ridiculousness. You can't keep on taking money off working people and giving it to people with assets. You can't do it forever.
We might agree on the point about the erosion of real wealth, but the answer to that isn't about some conspiracy or wanting to help out a class of people. It's about the erosion that happens because of inflation, and government has failed to control inflation, and our money has been inflated away, and government quite likes that, because if you've borrowed a lot as government and you print money, then inflation is a way out of your problem.
I know, but
and this is not a party political point, by the way. Tories did it just as much as Labour Party.
Alex, come on.
And the retail bosses we saw last week suggested the Chancellor's policy about national insurance had been inflationary.
Every single time you've had these huge amounts of money pumped into the economy, whether that's 2008, whether that's
printing
COVID,
money.
it always ends up in the hands of the top 0.5%, always. And at some point, you've got to turn around as a nation and say, they can't just walk off with all the money.
But it's
that simple.
Let's just be clear, all of the warning lights are on at once. Not only is the pound down and gilt yields up, inflation is up and employment is down, right? For years we were able to say, despite Brexit and all the headwinds people like to point to, more people were employed in this country than ever. Now, even with a higher population, employment is going down. We've got 1 million more people on incapacity benefit, on universal credit, who aren't required to work for life than we did 18 months ago.
That's
1 million more people.
That's not how incapacity benefit works. A, it's not even called that anymore. B, you have to have a reassessment every 3 years.
No, I just told you we've got more than 1 million people more who are not required to seek work again than we did 18 months ago. That is how it works.
For life.
Yes, that is the case. They never have to seek work again.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. Viewers will see this. You don't look at your Twitter, I do. They will tell us whether I'm right or you're right.
They get reassessed.
I thought that was part of the changes.
Some people do.
I thought that was part of the changes the government brought in.
And the worst thing
to
is
stop some people having reassessments.
Even though the number of people on universal credit has ballooned, the number of people who are required to seek work again, which is a category of people who exist, has gone down.
Listen, universal credit isn't how you don't have to work again.
For some people, you can remain on benefits without having to work. And my point was...
You mean seriously disabled people with lifelong conditions? Is that who you're talking about?
Many of these people are not seriously disabled. We've got 1 million more people seriously disabled suddenly in the economy than we did a year ago.
Of course you can easily have that. I mean, you have got...
And the moon is made of cheese, so...
No, Alex.
But you're willing to concede that the category at least exists, which a minute ago you denied.
No, come on. I mean, I know people with lifelong disabilities.
1 million of them? You know 1 million more than you did a year ago?
Come on,
you know 1 million more, if we're arguing by anecdote?
No, come on, you're being really facile.
I was. You said you know someone and therefore it can't be true.
Alex.
I was the one being facile.
Alex, come on, don't be so bombastic.
I know 2 million people who say you're wrong.
This is ridiculous.
We've got massive geopolitics to talk about.
Yeah.
OK.
Yeah.
And the budget, we presume the budget to be after mid-November is roughly what we're... Yeah?
Back end of November, which is, of course, going to point to a Scrooge budget. You can write the headlines already as you go into December. The government's either going to cut spending, which will be hard on some people, or raise taxes will be hard on some people. Scrooge budget either way.
Okay. So much to look forward to, clearly. Now then, President Trump has dismissed concerns that China and Russia are forming an axis to challenge the US-led world order. He was speaking after North Korea's leader arrived in Beijing to attend a military parade taking place tomorrow with his Chinese and Russian counterparts, of course. Our Asia correspondent, Helen Ansmith, reports now on how China is trying to send the US president a message.
Back on base in Beijing and visibly relaxed. If there is one message Xi Jinping was happy to land today, it is that this relationship is rock solid. There was a sense they went out of their way to show just how cosy things are. The intended audience, no doubt, an American president who had maybe hoped he could disrupt them a bit. Putin is here in part to join commemorations to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. But just listen to how he framed it. No doubts over whether China still backs him in the war he's currently waging.
The memory of being brothers in arms, trust, mutual assistance, firmness in defending common interests formed the basis of the comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation between Russia and China in the new era. We were always together then, we remain together now.
Meanwhile, this city, this army is preparing. Wednesday will host a huge military parade here. Tens of thousands of soldiers, a demonstration of might, a show of total perfection. We were given rare access to film some of the rehearsals to capture the anticipation.
Parade training is the main focus every day. It's an utmost honor to be part of this military parade and to be reviewed by the party's Central Committee, by General Secretary Xi Jinping, and this solemn, dignified and sacred moment.
But the parade will be remarkable for who is here too. None perhaps more striking than North Korea's Kim Jong-un. He rarely leaves his hermit kingdom. He has never attended an event as big as this. There is a real dichotomy to the messaging here. On the one hand, China has spent the last few days telling the world it is the great bridge builder, the great convener of nations, the great preserver of a peaceful global order. But at exactly the same moment, this city is literally locking down ahead of one of the greatest shows of military might seen in many years that will be attended by some of the most controversial world leaders. It is messaging that perhaps only China could manage. The parade will bring vast swathes of Beijing to a halt. The police and the army are everywhere. Opinion amongst locals divided.
It's a little disruption for sure, a little impact, but we all understand.
It's a once-in-a-decade event that showcases the nation's strength. The occasional half-day disruption is no big deal.
This city knows the world is watching, and behind the strict precautions, there is a confidence about what it will show. Helen Ann Smith, Sky News in Beijing.
Well, President Trump tonight said he is not at all concerned about the alliance forming around China and Russia. Here's what he said in the White House when questioned by reporters.
Sir, China's having a massive military parade that President Putin and Kim Jong-un will be attending. Do you interpret that as a challenge to this? And are you concerned at all about those countries trying to be some sort of counterweight?
Not at all. China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know, but China needs us much more than we need them. No, I don't see that at all, no.
One more.
And I had actually a very good meeting with President Putin a couple of weeks ago. We'll see if anything comes out of it. If it doesn't, we'll take a different stance.
Well, plenty of coverage about what we're seeing in China in the papers. The Times looking ahead, in fact, to China's military parade and details some of the weapons it is expected to show off. The paper also shows the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sat in his armoured train as it arrived in Beijing. Kim looks set to build bridges on his return to the world stage, writes The Eye, as he accompanies both Putin and President Xi at that military parade. Well, let's go back to Zoe and Alex. What an extraordinary collection of people it will be tomorrow. Some 20 world leaders, we're told, all of them happy to be alongside Kim Jong-un, to be fair. And President Trump, who is finally on show for the first time in several days, we'll come on to that shortly, says he's not bothered because China still needs him more than the other way around, which is, I mean, people are beginning to question that.
Actually, I think in the first instance, it shows what's really problematic about Trump's position, which is that he doesn't really want to be on the side against Kim Jong-un, because what everybody's critiquing about this is that, you know, especially with the friendship between China and Russia, it's a naked alliance of force against rights and international order and rules. But Trump is not that into international order. He's definitely not into rules. It's really kind of he tergiversates on whether or not he's Putin's buddy or not his buddy. So suddenly he finds himself having to defend the old order, which he's taken so much energy from deploring, while at the same time there's a much stronger power block of actual genuine allies arranging themselves in opposition to him. So I think it's a real problem. I think it's not just scary for the whole world, it's scary for how the authoritarian right in kind of what we used to think of as world's policeman type countries are going to respond to being outflanked.
Well, I certainly agree it's a problem, but I think it's a bit worse than you suggest, because yesterday the meeting that took place was not just between Vladimir Putin and China, it was also with Narendra Modi, President of India. And we're accustomed to saying bad things off the cuff about people who lead autocracies and repressive regimes. India, the world's largest democracy, is at risk of becoming the third leg of that stool. And if you think about it, not only have they maintained scrupulous neutrality on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and continued to buy Russian oil throughout, providing a real lifeline to Russia, but the Indians have also been on the receiving end of major tariffs from the Trump administration, just at the worst time. So you see, this sudden meeting of the three before the parade, which is coming up, which is...
I think Modi's not there for the parade.
No, he's not. That's what I meant. He's before the parade. You get the sign of that.
Modi holding the hand of Putin
and everybody
sending a message to Trump. You know, I don't need you.
And everybody always said that the kind of saving grace of that axis, China, Russia, India, was that they didn't seem to actually get on that well. China and Russia might have done, but India didn't seem to. And that I don't know, that seemed to be creating some kind of firewall between this really kind of very confident axis. But whatever the problems were before, and Modi's, they've gone away.
Well, as I said, it's the first time we saw Trump for a few days. Social media has been alight with rumours addressed by President Trump tonight, dismissing those rumours regarding his health, including his demise, which had circulated on social media over the weekend.
No, I've been very active, actually, over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious stuff. Well, it's fake news. You know, it's just it's so fake. That's why the media has so little credibility. I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? I said, I just left. And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know, it's Labor Day weekend. So I would say a lot of people know I was very active this Labor Day. I had heard that, but I didn't hear it to that extent.
Yeah, he said the media there. To be fair, this was on social media, was it not? Questioning where he was, why he was quiet for so many days. You know, questioning the truth of the photographs of him golfing. And
it wasn't just questioning where he was. The widespread allegations that he was dead. Yeah. And unless Sky and many other outlets have been duped, and that is fake news itself, I think we can at least confirm that the President of the United States is, in fact, not dead.
Yeah, OK. Yeah, no, we might just taken a holiday. There we go. That was I mean, it's been an interesting phase on social media, but don't necessarily blame the media when it's not the media. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including the Eye, saying the Prime Minister wants ID cards to help stop people crossing the Channel. Back in a moment.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Well, you're watching the press preview, joined again by The Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Welcome back. Hear more from both of you in just a moment. But first of all, Epping Forest District Council says it has been refused permission to challenge a court decision which allows asylum seekers to continue to be housed at the Bell Hotel. Protests have been held outside numerous hotels housing asylum seekers across the country. Well, the development came as police confirmed they're investigating after a Sky News interview with the man in Nuneaton was disrupted by women shouting about rape. Local businessman Zahin was speaking to our correspondent Shaman Freeman-Powell about tensions over asylum seekers when the incident happened. Shaman has more then from Nuneaton.
I spent several weeks here in Nuneaton, and the whole point was to try and find out how people really feel about the increase of asylum seekers. And I think what my report revealed is that there is tension, there is anger, and there is frustration. But what it also highlighted is what can happen when that frustration is misdirected.
The issue we have in our country, you got to use raping our kids. This is our country. How about becoming your country and do that in your kid? Never going to happen. Never going to happen, mate. We won't do that. When we become your country, do that to your kids. We're going to head beheaded.
You know,
these are our children. No, mate.
What are you teaching them kids? You're mouthing
all right. No.
Go
on.
Say something about marketing. Go on. The camera's rolling.
I don't care.
Just relax.
Now, it's a report that really has sparked a national conversation and highlighted the tensions here. But it's also illustrated that the issue is far bigger than just housing asylum seekers in hotels, because here in Nuneaton, they're living in dispersal accommodation in residential areas. And it's forced politicians to really think about what they are going to do with the increase of asylum seekers coming here, because whilst they're waiting to be processed, they do need to be housed. But perhaps this report has also made politicians think about how they're going to address community tensions.
So let's take a look at how the newspapers are covering all of these stories. There's the Eye. Starmer plans ID cards for all to help stop UK boat migrants is the front page splash for that paper. Daily Mail asks, when did Britain become North Korea? Claims it's another day in Starmer's socialist utopia as reports surface on the Prime Minister's ID card plan. And the possible introduction of ID cards is also picked up inside the Daily Express. So let's go to Zoe and Alex once again. Are we heading to a socialist utopia and getting ID cards? And Alex, how do you feel about them?
Oh, just delighted. I think, look, ID cards have been a solution in search of a problem for decades now. And
but we do have a problem.
Well, the trouble is, for every problem that you have, for some people, the solution will be ID cards. And it cannot be that because the government cannot manage people coming over the channel in small boats, all of us need to be compelled to have ID cards. That's not... But then people say,
but
yes,
the right wing can't complain that it's a crisis and then not allow this to be part of
that argument suggests that you get to do... That argument suggests that you get to do anything. If I say to you that you have to cut your leg off to solve the asylum crisis and you say, no, I don't want to, well, then you can't complain about the problem because you won't cut your leg off.
Specifically say it's because we have a grey economy that people
But I just specifically said it was about you not cutting your leg off. You see, that logic doesn't work at all, does it? No, well, why don't you care about the asylum crisis,
Because specifically the French with whom we are trying to negotiate suggest this is part of a solution.
And that is a fair point. And we do have, on the grey economy, a willingness to allow people to work effectively uncontained. But we also have a system where we don't process people for asylum or refugee status for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and that's entirely down to us.
I tell you what I think. I think this is like a real testament to how much the ideas arm of this government is leaning, or the arm we're about to cut off, is leaning on tired Blairite 1990s solutions. There is nothing in this that would be a solution to today's problems. Arguably, I would argue, Blair created this problem in the first place by stopping asylum seekers working while they were waiting for their applications to be processed, just to throw some red meat to the Daily Mail. We've been suffering from that decision for nearly 30 years, but nothing like as much as the asylum seekers.
But that would upset people who've been protesting about asylum themselves even more, that they're allowed to work Well, they're not even necessarily allowed to live in this country legally. Yeah?
Work and pay
That's
tax.
a complete hypothetical.
I agree.
We don't know that that would upset them more. It might be that if people were able to work, they would put down more bonds in the community. They wouldn't need so much. They wouldn't all need to be housed in hotels. They would disperse more easily.
We've just seen Yvette Cooper take action over family reunions because they were absorbing so much of the council's homes.
That's obviously completely different to allowing somebody to work. I'm completely willing to say it's at least plausible that people would say they're more favourable to someone who's working and earning a living and paying tax whilst waiting for their asylum than being a dosser in the hotel, putting it pejoratively.
You meet people if you're working with them, right? I've never met anybody in an asylum seeker hotel because if I went there, I'd be working.
Because they've got nothing to do and they're just sitting there.
Exactly. Whereas I've met people at work who've come from other countries to work and live here. Yeah. So you just don't put down tendrils in your community if you're not allowed to work. I don't think the social divisiveness would have happened without that policy decision made by Tony Blair, who now doubles down on it at every opportunity to make immigrants' lives harder and Keir Starmer look more daft. But I don't think ID cards are the answer.
No, it's as I say, it's a solution in search of a problem. But, you know, there you have two people who diametrically different views. I don't think people should be here in the first place. If you come here unlawfully, you should be turned around and sent back, and it should automatically invalidate any asylum or refugee process you seek to enter. And if that means leaving the European Convention, then we should. But if they're going to be here, they should be able to work, right? So you come to the point where on something like that, there is agreement.
Right, we've run out of time on that anyway. There's so much more to say, as always, but lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including a full run-through of tomorrow's front pages. Back in a moment. I was going to say